In the opening scene, Paul collects some supplies and flees the apparent end of civilization, with sirens and explosions in the background. The unidentified night creature attacked the Earth and the government launched nukes to kill them. Paul watches the devastated city from afar and arrives in a remote area. In a hiding spot, he cradles his two infant boys, assuring them that they will be fine. 15 years later, Paul and his twin sons, Joseph and Thomas, live in a remote farmhouse. They find tranquility by day but fear the night. One evening, there is a moment of panic when Thomas doesn't return home before sunset from the nearby rose farm, and the sun begins to set. After waiting for too long, Paul runs to find his son, but eventually, he arrives. Paul becomes angry with him and Thomas tells him that I lost track of time. They close the windows and doors of the house so that no monster can enter. The Earth is invaded by deadly creatures that kill people only in the dark of night. After asking their sons are they safe and secure, Paul asks them to have dinner. As the family sits at the dinner table, Paul tells Thomas that if you're late again, you will never go outside, but the boy reveals himself to be the bigger risk taker. Joseph appears more intellectual and used to play mischief with his brother, due to which both the brothers started fighting. Paul stops them and slams the table, saying men don't fight, and both boys slam the table. After dinner, Paul sees outside through the hole while Joseph is playing chess alone and Thomas is reading the book. Moments later, their dog starts rubbing its paws on the floor. Seeing this, Thomas and Paul go downstairs to check. The creature starts banging on the door to come inside, but they hold the door tightly until the creature leaves. Paul and Thomas come upstairs and Joseph tells them that the creature shook the door 3 times, which means they now know humans are living here. The next morning, Paul sees the creature's handprints and lots of bugs on the door, so the 3 of them start chopping wood. Thomas asks his father to go to Rose's farm, but Paul says him to cut the woods, then he can go anywhere he wants. Joseph is working on a project and Paul convinces him to show him what he's been working on. It turns out to be a rudimentary car, though the boy has so far been unable to make it work. Joseph says it is not working yet, that's why I didn't tell anyone about it. Paul makes 2 changes, and the motor coughs to life. All 3 of them climb into the car, and Paul shows Joseph how to use the pedals. Before going back to the house, Paul reminds the boys that they have several chores to do. Thomas protests that he wants to go to Rose's farm, but Paul tells him to go tomorrow. Thomas secretly has a crush on Rose's daughter Charlotte, and on the way, Thomas says to his brother, because of you I could not go to the farm. Hearing this, Joseph gets angry and tells Thomas, I don't need your help, you can go wherever you want. Thomas tells his brother that he is leaving and that Joseph can meet him later at the barn so they can return home together. Thomas greets Mr. Rose and his wife, and they appreciate him for coming. Thomas meets Charlotte and she asks him to go with her to do some work. After fixing the door, Paul sits alone for a while and smokes, and there on the rock he sees the creature's tunnel. Joseph reaches the dockyard where he attaches Rob to himself and goes inside the room to collect some supplies. Inside, he sees the creature's tunnel from which many bugs come out and attack him, and he rushes outside. However, Thomas spends too much time with Charlotte and they hug each other for a while. Watching the sun go down, Thomas runs recklessly, trying to get back to the car in time. Joseph's car wouldn't start, and Paul, on the other hand, saw the setting sun and was worried that his sons hadn't returned yet. Thomas trips and falls into a crevice, while Joseph starts the car and waits for his brother at the barn, but he doesn't come and Joseph also leaves for home. Paul asks Joseph about Thomas and he tells his father that Thomas left for the farm and said he'd meet him before sunset. Fearing the worst, Paul tells Joseph to lock himself in the house and goes out to find Thomas. After regaining consciousness, Thomas sees the creature's tunnel in the pit and finds himself in the darkness. Thomas tries to find a way out with the help of a lighter but is attacked by the creature. Calling for his missing son, Paul finally hears Thomas's voice from the cave and makes his way to him. Paul kills one of the creatures and goes down where he finds his son. Paul says that they have to block the entrance, as they will have to spend the night there. At home, Joseph hopes to be able to trap one of the intruders so he can study it. While Joseph pretends to sleep, the creature opens the door lock by using a hand. As the creature tries to attack him, he quickly opens the trap and locks the creature inside the cage. In the cave, ferocious creatures try to get to the men and attack them from under the ground. Paul uses the flare and kills some of the creatures and gets injured himself. The next morning, Joseph uses the car to find them. Their dog leads Joseph to the place where he sees his father badly injured. Paul is still unconscious and the boys put him in the car and take him home. Thomas hears the creatures rattling in the cage and Joseph tells him that last night he caught it to study. The boys try to figure out how to help him and they decide to take him to the Rose farm. Thomas accidentally opens the cage and the creature runs into the room to avoid the sunlight. When the creature attacks them, Joseph stabs it and Thomas cuts its head. While Joseph is cutting up some of the creature's body parts for study, Thomas asks him to take their father to Rose's farm. Joseph tells him that going there is just a waste of time because they won't help them. But Thomas insists on going there and Joseph agrees. The boys put their father into the car and leave toward the farm. After reaching the farm, Thomas asks Mr. Rose to help their father, but they tell him they can't spare any medicine and they also don't have any room. Charlotte says they have a room and Rose says only Thomas can stay with them. Joseph asks his brother to stay and says you are not responsible. Listening to this, Thomas gets angry and both of them start fighting. After the short fight, Joseph leaves back home with his father and Thomas joins Rose's farm. Charlotte takes him to the room and they share their first kiss. Rose comes inside the room and catches them. He scolds Charlotte and asks her to leave. Arriving home, Joseph sees the creature dig a hole under their house. He leaves his father inside and then goes to the room where he puts logs on the creature's tunnel to set some kind of a trap for the creature. While Thomas searches for the medicine, Charlotte sees him, and he asks her for the medicine for his father. Charlotte gives him the medicine while Rose hears them talking. Thomas runs to his house but is stopped at gunpoint by the guard. Thomas tells him that he didn't steal the medicine Charlotte gave him, but the guard takes him back inside the farm. The guards tie Thomas thinking he is a thief and want to shoot him. Before he can kill him, the creature pulls the guard beneath. Rose and his wake up after hearing the screams and the creature attacks. The room catches fire and when Rose's wife runs to see her daughter, another creature rips her apart. Charlotte comes outside to see her parents and after seeing her mother dead she screams. The creature's horde comes and starts killing people one by one. Thomas unties himself, but when the creature is just about to attack him, Charlotte shoots the creature. Everyone is dead on the farm and they both run from there. Joseph heard a knock on the door and when he opened it he saw Thomas and Charlotte. Thomas gives him medicine and tells him everyone on the farm is dead. They give medicine to their father and Joseph tells them the creatures have dug under the house and Paul asks them to fight. The trio goes to the garage where they take some gasoline cans and lift the defreezer inside the house. Joseph asks Thomas and Charlotte to keep an eye outside so he can set the trap easily. Joseph sprinkles gasoline on the logs in the living room and lights a cigar with a lighter. The two creatures attack Thomas and Charlotte, but they kill them and run upstairs where Joseph says to let the creature horde come inside. Wounded Paul takes the gun from Charlotte and starts shooting the creature's horde. Paul locks himself in the creature's room and watches his children in his final moments. As the creatures attack him, an explosion occurs and the trio hides in the freezer while the creatures burn down. The trio runs outside and starts the car to leave. The creature horde shapes into a wheel and starts chasing the trio. Charlotte fires her gun at the horde of creatures which unleashes them and kills them all. The trio goes to the Roses farm where Charlotte cries over her parents' death. Joseph tells them to go to the nearest valley where they can find shelter and humans. When Charlotte says what if they are all dead, Joseph tells her maybe someone survived as we did. Joseph, Thomas, and Charlotte leave in the car, searching for other people. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.